Good afternoon. How are you guys? You like the conference so far? Great, all three of you. Great.
Z-balls.
Hi, my name is Charlie Owen. I'm a program manager on the Windows Media Center team with Microsoft, and joining me today is...
Hi, I'm Peng Li. I'm the director of the Multimedia Platforms Group at Schematic. We're an interactive agency in New York and LA.
Yeah, and before we get started, I want to give a shout out to my peeps behind stage. These guys are the things that make it happen. So Dave and Ryan, Leslie and Mary, who is not backstage, she's back there. These guys have really made our keynotes and stuff just really sing and everything. So I'm going to give them a personal hand of applause. If you want to join in, that's fine. That's good. Thank you very much. That's my way of getting a standing ovation at the beginning. So we want to talk about a couple of things this morning. Talking about the Windows Media Center ecosystem. Now, how many of you people were here for the keynote this morning, which you saw Media Center? Anybody? Good. I thought that was a pretty compelling demo. We want to talk about the Windows Media Center ecosystem, what makes it up, and why is it powerful? Why should you be using that? And really, it's powerful for the consumer. It's designed from the ground up to enable highly usable digital media experiences. It's really a fundamental way of consumers to be able to enjoy all of the content that is on their PC from their couch, sitting back with a remote control. It's you don't need to involve a mouse and keyboard or go through folders or menus on applications. It's pretty easy. How easy is it? It's this easy. You saw this morning. Joe demonstrated the album art view in Media Center. And this is really a way for you, instead of going through track labels, is going through and selecting album art. For example, I'm a big fan of Lenny Kravitz. I recognize his 5 album by the album art. If you go into a media store, if you go into an online store, you're usually drilling down on the visuals first and the text second. So we kind of designed Media Center to be a very visual way of navigating all of the digital content on your PC. It's also very simply driven with a remote control. For applications and services designed for Media Center, including Media Center itself, up, down, left, right, and OK, and the back button, are all the consumer really needs to learn how to use a Media Center application. Now, for some of us that are super geeks, we love command line stuff, and I'll whip out command lines. I never start Notepad with the mouse and keyboard. I always start run, type Notepad, hit enter, and go for it. But for people like my wife, it's a really big barrier to entry to enjoy the digital media content with some of the tools such as iTunes and Windows Media Player, because it's just really not simple enough. All she wants to do is go in and enjoy her digital media content. And the remote control enables that because she can very simply navigate very much like she would a DVD menu. In addition, I want to state for the record that all other buttons on this remote control are shortcuts, which help the end user do other things. For example, the volume up and down is a pretty important thing. The transport controls that you see on the remote control are there to help the user do things within the user interface, but are really not required to enjoy Media Center or the applications. We also use those other buttons within the Media Center interface, and partner applications can do as well. So, for example, when you're in the music library, you can use page up and page down, the channel up, channel down on the remote control to go forward and faster and navigate your content more quickly. But it's really it takes the great Windows interface and boils it down to the very basics that are needed to enjoy great digital media experiences. So not only is it powerful for the consumer to use, very approachable from a consumer perspective, very powerful for the consumer to use, but it's also very powerful for the content owner. And I think, Ping, you guys have been seeing that a good bit as well. With applications and services designed for Media Center, you can remote those, regardless of whether they're designed in HTML or Windows Presentation Foundation, which we saw the NASCAR application in this morning, or the Media Center presentation layer. All three of those application frameworks that you use can remote to the Xbox 360. So we're going to see a demo of that, or not a demo of that, we're going to see some screenshots from that. But basically, it gets that content that's been siloed or locked in the home office into other areas of the home. So you're able to basically use the PC as a traditional PC, as we do in my house. It's in the home office. My wife will turn around and scrapbook and then use the remote control to watch her favorite show, Law & Order, which we saw a clip of this morning. But then we can also use it through Media Center Extender through Xbox 360 up in our living room and use all the great content that's there. Partner applications will also run on the Xbox 360. And the really neat thing about that is the partners don't need to do any additional work. This is a blog post. It's a lot of text there, but the key takeaway I want you to take from there is Scott Hanselman, who is a regional director for Microsoft, said, yes, folks, XM satellite radio over Xbox 360. And you'll notice he's got an Xbox 360 sitting in his living room stack. Scott was going to go off and try to write a client on his own to get XM radio through some sort of hacking and stuff like that to work on the Xbox 360. He did a Google search and found, hey, XM radio is available for Media Center. He installed it on his Media Center PC, and it runs on the Xbox 360. And the great thing about that is XM radio did not have to know Xbox 360, did not have to know how to code for Xbox 360. They targeted the Media Center platform, and it ran with 0 code changes on the Xbox 360. And I think, Ping, this is where I'm going to kind of introduce you and bring you into the conversation. You have some experience in creating these types of applications, don't you?
Yes. One of the most recent projects we worked on was MTV Overdrive. Those who haven't seen it before, MTV Overdrive is basically a video-on-demand application that serves video, music videos, and news and up-to-date events. One of the goals that we had for Schematic was to develop an easy-to-use interface, and we really wanted a simple navigation experience that would give users access to thousands of videos from the living room. To really do this, we had to really focus on the remote control and the up, down, left, right pattern that's there. From the remote, users are able to access all the videos, including archives and even some live feeds. In addition, also because the interface was so flexible, we were able to reskin it and use it for other brands, including Comedy Central Motherload, VH1 V-Spot, and MTVU. Each of the applications are all very similar in that they deliver video on demand. And even though they all have sort of different target audiences, they share one thing in common. They share the same easy-to-use interface. And if you haven't seen any of these apps yet, you can see them on Media Center in the online spotlight.
So these are available today. And kind of the neat thing about this is you guys created these applications for MTV before Xbox 360 ever shipped.
Right.
And what did you find out after Xbox 360 shipped?
We found that we really didn't have to change the UI to get the UI to work. The interface just worked the same as it does on the Media Center.
Very cool. And this morning we saw Joe walk through the Comedy Central app on the Xbox 360. No changes there. So that's very cool. So it's powerful for the consumer. It's a very enabling technology, very approachable technology, easy to use. It's very powerful for the content owner or for the application and services company to create experiences that flow throughout the home, very rich experiences, as well as it's very powerful for the designer and the developer. It's now, with the technologies coming online with Windows Vista, it's now much easier for you to deliver rich, immersive, next-generation consumer experiences.
Right. Once we really started playing around with Vista, we really discovered that the graphics performance really went up a level. Compared to the previous Media Center, developers and designers now have access to like a much bigger feature set, like animations that run natively, video overlay, and full access to the .NET framework. And it's really these kinds of features that really open the door for the developers and designers to build the next generation of UI interfaces.
Yep. So it'll be pretty cool. So we want to kind of introduce to you the 3 different application paradigms that are available for Windows Media Center in the Windows Vista timeframe, one of which is available today that you can use. And there are basically 3 choices. The first choice is the Windows Media Center Presentation Layer application. This is created using Media Center Markup Language, which is a specification of XML, as well as the .NET Framework 2.0. We have a talk immediately following this one that talks about designing for the 10-foot experience that is done by Brian Kralovich, Creative Director at Microsoft, as well as Kate from Schematic and Richard Cardrin of ZTools, who have done some of the other applications in Online Spotlight. So I'd encourage you to come to that. But the Windows Media Center Presentation Layer is the exact technologies and tools that we use to create Media Center itself. We're exposing that framework and allowing developers to create experiences that are designed for the remote control with our framework. The Q podcast application that we saw this morning was done in Media Center presentation layer. You can also use WinFX, a specific XAML browser application, otherwise known as an XBAP. The NASCAR application demo that we saw this morning was a WinFX XBAP, and it's a very powerful, it's the next generation platform for Windows that allows you not only to target Windows Media Center applications, but also traditional desktop mouse and keyboard as well. So there's a couple of great talks there, developing a Windows Presentation Foundation application, as well as a designer's overview of Windows Presentation Foundation, which Robert Ingebretson did earlier today, which you can go and view up on the web when they publish those. So finally, we also have a hosted HTML environment. All the apps that we've got out there today, such as MTV and Comedy Central and those things, are done in hosted HTML. You create those obviously with HTML and JavaScript. And we have some new technologies such as Atlas and things like that, and Expression Web Designer, which help you create more rich and compelling experiences if you choose HTML. So we've got 3 choices. It's really about choices, kind of what you would choose for each. If you're going to do just a Media Center type application, you would typically choose something like the Windows Media Center presentation layer. It provides the tightest integration with Media Center, but it's not available on the Windows desktop. If you want to do Windows desktop development as well as Media Center, if you've got a 2-foot website, what we call a 2-foot website, just traditional mouse and keyboard, and a 10-foot experience, which is remote control driven, you would probably pick WinFX, Windows Presentation Foundation. If you want to target the masses of the 10 million Media Center PCs that are out there today, if that's you really want to have a well-established market, you would typically choose hosted HTML. So what we're going to present today is only a subset. There's just no way in an hour that we could present all 3 of these technologies and have you come away with a good feeling for any of them. So we're going to pick out the Windows Media Center presentation layer application and demonstrate some of the things that you would use to build those types of applications today. There's lots of other talks on the other technologies that are available here at MIX06, as well as on the web. So a brief introduction to the Windows Media Center presentation layer. I'm going to walk through this slide. It's a little bit granular. It's a little deep. Just bear with me. I'll give you kind of an overview. It's the geekiest slide I have. Windows Media Center presentation layer, and that's pretty small. So the concept of here, how many people went to Computer Science 101 and learned about Model View Controller? Can I get a show of hands? Okay, so you're very familiar with the Model View Controller. We adhere very strictly to the Model View Controller perspective. So for model, as a refresher course, model is your logic and your data. Your view is the user interface, and when we combine the 2 of these things, we get an application, or what we call a user experience. With the Windows Media Center presentation layer, there's some key technologies that you need to come away understanding. The Microsoft.NET Framework 2.0, which is developed using managed code such as C#. You can also choose VB.NET, J#, any of those managed code languages you could use to create Media Center presentation layer applications. For the view portion of this, we have the Windows Media Center presentation layer, and we use XML in the form of Media Center markup language, which we're going to show you a little bit of in a few minutes. When we take our model of managed code Microsoft.NET Framework 2.0, combine it with the Media Center markup language, we get a Windows Media Center presentation layer application. Sorry that name's so long. I didn't control it. I wanted to call it something very simple, but hey, that's what happens when marketing folks get in.
But what it really boils down to is, designers build interfaces that, and they aren't really overwhelmed by code, while developers stick to what they know best in writing code. And there's a really clear separation, and they can work independently. Yep.
So we're going to come back to that. And really, we've got 3 different types of applications that we can actually build within the Windows Media Center presentation layer. One is a background local application that has no view, has no UI. This is a listener application that might be listening to a web service to update the user. Think emergency broadcast system could be implemented with a background. So regardless of where the user is in Media Center, they can get a pop-up notification. They can say, hey, your friend is online. Would you like to talk with them and stuff like that? We can also do a web application. This is brand new. We just introduced this this past weekend on our team blog. This basically allows you to use an ASP.NET, a PHP application on the web server that generates Media Center markup language that renders with full fidelity on the Media Center PC. And that's all you're pushing down to the Media Center PC. There's no local install that needs to happen on the box. They get this beautiful UI. You can call Media Center APIs, such as Play Media, to get video and audio to play back in the interface. It's very cool if you're developing web-type applications today. And finally, we can combine both of these and get a full-on Media Center application that can call web services, can do anything that the .NET framework allows you to do, full access to the local hard drive and all that, but also present full user experience to the end user.
So the web portion is relatively new. Why is there a web portion and there's a local UI?
That's a good question. Why is there basically these three types of apps? Why is there web and why is there a local application? Well, fundamentally, we found out that partners such as Yahoo and AOL traditionally don't create client-side installable software. They look at something that they ship every day as a web experience. So with the web application, this allows you to create that server-side code that renders Media Center markup language, and you never have to install a thing. So it's very powerful for those workflows that are web-only type applications to continue using the paradigm they do. On the flip side, we have applications that want to be locally installed, that need local disk access and things like that. So we have the local full UX. And it's really just to meet a need for both the traditional web technologies versus the traditional ISVs that install local code. So I want to briefly touch on the Microsoft.NET Framework 2.0. I'm kind of approaching this from the standpoint that you've never heard of it. If this is too childish for you, please bear with me. The Microsoft.NET Framework 2.0 is very enabling. I sat down with this the other week and we tried to figure out what is kind of one of the common themes of a partner application. And one of the partner applications they all need to do, or a lot of them need to do, is a download manager. They need to get content from the cloud to the local machine. And how many people have ever tried to implement that type of functionality in Win32? Anybody? Yeah, so you kind of know it's painful, right? Sometimes it can be really painful. Well, with the .NET Framework 2.0, if you ask yourself or say to yourself, I need a download manager, here's the sum total of the amount of code that you need, including a comment for how you call this command line. Basically, we use the system.NET namespace, create a web client, pass in two strings, where I want to get the content and where I want to put the content, and call client.downloadFile. Boom. This works today. You can compile this amount of code in the .NET Framework, and boom, you have a download manager. Now, albeit it's a very simple one, if you need to add DRM and stuff like that, you would need to add that code in there as well to enable those scenarios. But fundamentally, it's very easy to do the things that you need to do without a ton of code, without a ton of maintenance to enable those things. So the Microsoft.NET Framework 2.0 is very enabling, and that's where we kind of start with the next generation of Media Center applications. So, Ping, let's talk a little bit about the Media Center markup language. And I know one thing, from what you guys have found out, Ping Schematic helped us write the podcast Media Center client that you saw this morning, along with Stephen Taub, who's down here on the front row. Hey, Stephen, how you doing? And so one of the things that came back from that interaction is that this markup is pretty readable. Can you tell us more?
Right. When you first look at the markup, it really looks like XML, and what it really boils down to is XML and PNGs, and it's really easy to make the comparison with that to HTML and GIFs, because in the same way that HTML is used to control the layout of GIFs in web pages, on the Media Center, XML really controls the layout of PNGs, but really in a much more powerful way in terms of being able to animate and rotate graphics, and without needing to get into code.
So let's take a look at some of that and kind of give just a simple example of what that. So we're going to switch over here and we're going to open up some markup, and we'll notice we get some animation here. We get some flying in. This is just going to repeat itself, so bear with me. We have some glowing back behind this logo. We also have a lens flare in the upper right-hand corner, and this thing is animating over time. And what you're telling me is this is just pure XML, PNG. There's no code whatsoever behind this.
Right. All that's there is markup and I think just about 3 PNGs and the markup does all the animation.
Okay, so if we take a look at that logo, here's our 3 PNGs. I can actually make this a little bit bigger. Extra large icons. We have our background glow, we have our static logo, and then we have a logo that's lens flare, and we have our media center markup language, which if we take a look at that, it's just XML. There's no code here whatsoever. That's kind of neat.
Right, and what that word means is peace, so in case you were wondering.
Oh, okay, Chinese characters for peace. So let's go back and say, not only is it boiled down to XML and PNG, but there's some other things here as well. How much does a person need to learn? What's kind of the key takeaways here?
You actually really only need to, the skill set is really lightweight. You really don't need to really understand how to code because the markup really uses meaningful words like UI, layout, animation, and keyframe. So when you first look at the XML, it's sort of easy to follow. Something like keyframe is really important because for that type of motion graphics that you do on Media Center, animators get involved and they're really familiar with terms like keyframe and animation because once they hear the word keyframe, they intuitively know that this is going to be based on some time interval and some start and end action. This could be rotating an image or spinning it or just positioning it on the stage.
Okay, so why don't we take a look at some other, a little bit more thing than just a sliding logo around. By the way, I'm using a Media Center markup language preview tool that ships with the SDK and allows you to create these MCML and these experiences and preview them and tweak them and edit them. So I'm going to load up this little app, and we have some sound here. And we have some gratuitous animation that it's flipping and it's making this little bloop, 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 bloop sound. And we notice we have some alpha blendings. For example, this purchase and the play button. You can see through the play button to the purchase button. We also have some focus change so that when the focus goes to a particular button, it turns green. We have some of these animations and stuff like that. And so it's really made for design technologists. So if we take a look at the code for this particular item, we have some key things here. Kind of take a walk through. We have a UI called My Button. We have some properties here. We're actually referencing the Microsoft Core library from the .NET framework so we can leverage the string type so we can create a label that's called name or my label, and we always have to pass it in. It's required. You always have to pass that in to when you call this MCML. We have some rules. Here's kind of an important thing that I think you guys have some experience with. In order to make any item focusable within Media Center and respond to the remote control, it takes one line of code, and that's saying key interactive is true. And how important is that to you guys? What kind of experience have you had?
That's really important because, to do this in any sort of other way, including some of the HTML methods that we've tried, it takes a lot more code to do that and to sort of be as responsive as it is on the Media Center.
Okay, so it's very manageable there. We also have some conditions here so that when we get key focus is true, we do some actions. We set the content of the button to an image, so we change the focus image from green to blue and vice versa. We play an animation, which is called grow, which we'll take a look at. And we play the sound, which is aqua hover, which is that bloop, bloop, bloop sound you hear. When our key focus is false, we basically reverse some of this stuff out. We set the background PNG of the button to false, as well as use an animation called shrink. Here's our graphic that is our button image itself, and it's set to focus false. It has some margins and some padding. So this is very similar to HTML that you'll see has a lot of the same things. We have an alpha blending here.
Right, and that sort of goes back to all the meaningful keywords that are being used. You see graphic, everyone really knows what a graphic is. Sound, so you know what sound is going to do.
Yep. So we have image, we have animation, which is composed of keyframes. Again, a design technologist will be very familiar with keyframes. Here we do three things. We scale up over about a third of a second here to double its size, as well as change the alpha transparency from about 50% to 90%, and rotate over about a third of a second here, 360 degrees. So for a design technologist, they'll be very familiar with these terms and can write this markup pretty easily.
If you see something like scale keyframe, you immediately know that you're going to try to scale a graphic or an object or something. If you see an alpha, you immediately know that you're going to try to fade something in or fade something out. And again, with rotate keyframe, you immediately know that you're going to try to rotate something either on the x-axis, y-axis, or z-axis. And going back to the design technologist part, a design technologist is really a developer who focuses on the UI and user experience and doesn't really do a lot of programming. But I kind of use the term developer loosely because I would consider a designer who can do HTML a design technologist.
Okay, cool. So not only is it boiled down to basically XML plus PNGs, the skill's pretty lightweight. It's going to be designed for design technologists. It shares a lot of the same namings that we might find in HTML, for example. But there's a, what if I'm really not bought in? What if I'm kind of going, this seems like a lot of smoke and mirrors? You guys have been using the SDK in its beta form for about 4 weeks by the time we delivered the Q application, the podcast client. And kind of what's been your experience?
Right, we've roughly used, I guess, about 4 weeks. And I can honestly say that if you can do HTML and JavaScript, you can do Media Center markup language. It's really not very complicated, and one of the great things about the markup language is that it comes prepackaged with a lot of components that you can reuse in varying combinations to build a majority of the UI interfaces out there.
Cool. So we kind of want to talk a little bit about how much we have to change the back end, how you guys would develop applications, and through some conversations we kind of found out that the change is fairly little. There's not a whole lot of change that you guys have to rethink how you develop applications. So I think the first strongest point there is the clear separation of that model and view. And can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, our process really doesn't change because we have designers who focus on the design. And in this case, they're going to be design technologists, and they're going to create the markup. And once they get that refined and perfected, they're going to hand it off to developers, and they package it all together, and you get your Media Center application.
Cool. So developers can focus on the logic and data, and designers can focus on the design and user experience.
Right.
And what has been your experience with this? Can you tell me a little bit? I mean, I know that basically, forward, there we go. We basically, I've been pestering you guys for the opening animation for our podcast client, and got a little nervous because, they were saying, we're working on it. And I challenged you guys to come up with this very Lucasfilm-esque opening animation that would just really blow people's socks off. And the nice thing about that is you guys coded it and didn't even come and talk to us. And we should probably show folks that while you tell us a little bit more about it.
Right. Basically, we started with a motion designer who created the concept of a series of zooming images. And he really focused on the animation and not worrying about how it would actually work in the end. And once he came up with the concept, he walked through it with me through the storyboards. And I went to the markup, and I created in only a couple of hours, but it required a lot of tweaking. But again, I was working independently, and I didn't need to get into any of the managed code.
Okay. So here's the opening animation. It takes a few minutes because you're actually really pushing our platform. You got some really large images that we're decompressing on the fly, 32 bits per pixel and everything. And this is kind of walk us through this experience here.
Right. This is actually a lot of images here, about 7 megs worth, very high resolution. What you're seeing right now is a UI panel zooming in, and it does a quick tilt to the left, tilt back to the right, and also at the same time sliding a little bit to the left, and it finishes back with a final zoom back into the schematic logo. Overall, a really simple animation that uses only 3 animation types, but it shows a great, really good sense of space in 3D.
Cool. And kind of the neat thing about this is you guys came in very late. I think you shipped us the code for this on Friday.
Right. It was really easy to get it incorporated into the app because I actually, like I said, I actually only spent like a couple hours writing the actual markup. The majority of the time was actually tweaking it with the motion artist to get it perfect.
Getting exactly what you wanted.
Right.
So,
and then all we did was zipped up the assets and the the markup and sent it over to you guys in Microsoft.
Yep, so you sent it over to me, and we introduced it into the project and made it up with Steven's code that he had written for getting the RSS feeds and everything like that. And quite literally, I took Ping's email, copied the zip file, unpacked it, copied it into our source tree, boom, we're done. I didn't have to get a designer or a developer. That's kind of the fundamental interesting thing about this is, how many of you guys are designers that you've ever designed this beautiful, wonderful UI and handed it over to somebody like me who is more of a developer? What do you get? Wonderful UI called animated GIFs, right? Because that's the sum total of what I, as a developer, I can only do stick figures, honestly. So with something like this, Ping, as the design technologist, as the designer, was able to deliver exactly what we shipped in the application. And me as a developer did not have to tweak it, twirl it, do anything with it to be extra special. And I think we can actually demonstrate that a little bit more with we can go back to our 5-button application and kind of rewind a little bit and kind of show people what it looked like when I was the designer. It's a little scary, actually. So we've got it here. We've got a couple of batch files that basically replaces all of Ping's really nice media center markup language with the animations and the asynchronous sounds and things like that, his pretty buttons of the green and blue. And we're going to reverse it back to Charlie's dev art. So you can see here, we changed the button.mcml, doesn't have any code with it. This time when we see it, we'll get a distinct idea of my design abilities, which are kind of a little scary.
It's going to be funny.
It's thanks, appreciate that. Let's see, MCML application. Let's open up the markup file, and oh boy,
it's really exciting.
Does this look familiar? Is this what your designs look like when you turn them over to a developer? The nice thing is, you notice that I'm using, if I had a remote control here, I'm just using the up and down. You notice that it still pays attention to the mouse and the keyboard, everything like that. But I can go on as the developer. I can go ahead and hook this up so that play goes out and plays content, it purchases content, it rents content. It can do all those things, but Ping can continue to do all the nice design work and then come in and continue to work on that art and revise it and make it better over time. So now I've just basically copied in Ping's art as he's delivered it back to us. If we go back in here and we open up this same default.mcml after Ping has gloriously revised it, we now get back our animations and our sounds and wonderful. So it's really easy, really simple to the clear separation of model and view. Ping can continue to work on the really nice, rich user experience. I can continue to make sure that when somebody wants to purchase content from me, they can purchase content. We can largely work independent. Ping can actually check in all this markup directly into the source code tree, never has to have a developer touch it.
And one thing I want to point out is that the markup is interpreted on the fly, so you can make tweaks to the markup and see your results right away, and that makes it really easy for a design technologist to come in and kind of tweak it on end until they think it's perfect.
Yep. So not only do we have a clear separation of model and view, where the designers can continue to work on what they do best, and that's design, the look and feel of the app, and developers can focus on that logic and data app layer. The designers can actually continue to use the very familiar tools they've become accustomed to. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys found out while you were developing the Q application?
Right, with the Q intro, we really didn't change any of our design tools. All the designers continue to use the same tools that they knew best. They used, Photoshop, Illustrator. They could have even used Paint to create these assets. As long as your tool can output PNGs, Media Center will be able to consume it.
Very cool. So for me, I'm a longtime Photoshop user. It's the only design art. I can edit photos, I just can't create original art. So that's very important to me. I don't want to go off and learn new tools. I want to use the existing tools that I've got in my existing workflow that I'm developing applications today. Finally, probably one of the most powerful things, we kind of already touched on this, is you guys got to deliver the design that we used in the podcast client, especially with the opening animation. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, really because the designers were so much more in control of the layout, and because the platform was so much more powerful, they were able to create the interfaces and experiences that really didn't compromise the original design. They were really less dependent on the developers in implementing the final product, and it was really easy to integrate.
Yep, so user experience department creates what ships, because Media Center Markup Language is friendly to those design technologists. So let's take a kind of a quick walk through the podcast client for Media Center that we saw this morning, and we'll take a look at some of your code that you did. So we're going to launch up Media Center. We've already shown you that we could render the opening animation with just purely markup. And we're going to go over here to more programs and launch the podcast client. A couple of things it's doing here as it loads in, it's rendering all of this UI, getting it ready to deliver the opening animation here. This is beta software, so it's taking us about 10 seconds. At the same time, Steven's code is going off and getting the individual feeds, the channels, as well as the items for these individual feeds. And you'll see this schematic design, this user interface to have this helix feeling around. You'll notice that we have very smooth animations through this. I can go pretty quick. You'll notice that it's also pretty fast, and we have some animations so that there's timing issues. You'll notice that when I animate up, my text flies in from the right, my text flies in from the bottom, and when I navigate off, that text zooms off into the background. So some really aesthetically pleasing and nice things. If I go in here to Rocket Boom, they happen to not have individual items associated with images, but it's essentially the same code that I'm reusing here. I've actually just tweaked it slightly. I think you can see the opening animation for here is a little bit slower, and it's kind of a little bit more elegant when it comes in. When I drill down into this, we actually changed the markup on the fly using just, again, XML to really give us a little bit more of a fast come in, and then we finally do this individual flip because we've used those parameters in the XML to tweak those so we can really reuse animation chunks. You'll notice another thing of this interface, we've also got a background that's alpha blended. We have this melt animation in the background. That's an RSS logo, and that's alpha blended on a couple of levels. There's about 4 levels of Z order here that's all defined in markup. It's very powerful. If we go into one of these particular feeds, we can see that we've got the video playing. We're relying on the IE RSS store to download this content for us. So it's locally on the box. It's very quick playback. But you notice that my video plays, and as I turn that graphical element, my video turns as well. So very cool. We can go back and let's go select an audio feed that we can see with some images here. Again, we're turning these on the Helix. It's very performant. I can go just about as fast as I want to, and we've punched this thing. It's running really well. I'm actually quite pleased.
When I saw the application for the first time, I was actually really blown away by how fast it actually performs, because it's at least 3 times faster than what I expected.
Really? So you were expecting a little bit more low fidelity?
Exactly.
Wow.
And the menu's like so responsive as you navigate. It's amazing.
So can you walk us through some of this code and kind of tell us how you built out that opening animation?
Sure.
There we go.
So the intro is actually very simple. I start off with a main UI element, which I'm going to call intro. And in it, I tell it that it's going to have a schematic logo, the schematic panels, which is the series of stacked images that you see, and a graphical background. This is all Z-indexed correctly. And then I go in to find the schematic panels. I basically say that it's going to load in a series of about 15 panels. The next thing that I do is that I define what each of the panels are. As this all is happening, I zoom into the main panel with a series of animations here, and what I'm basically telling it is to scale it from 0.07 scale to the 20 scale, and this happens over a period of 4.5 seconds to 6 seconds. And when you get into the actual UI panels, you'll see that I'm saying that it's going to have a graphic in there. I load in an asset here, and I tell it to start with a scale of 0.37. And then this is the interesting part. I get into the actual animation. All it is I tell it, I'm going to start some animations, and the first animation is going to have a series of keyframes. And the first animation that I do is a rotate keyframe, which basically I'm rotating it to about 75 degrees to the left. And then as this is happening, I slide it with the position keyframe about 150 pixels to the left also. About a second later, I reversed this entire process, basically by doing the exact same thing in reverse, but I specify different start and end times. And as all this is happening, I specify an alpha keyframe, which fades the image as it zooms in. And this right here is actually the heart of the intro. I mean, all I do from this point is I just copy and paste this UI 15 times over, and I adjust the parameters until I get it to work correctly. And the best part about this is that I can work independently. I didn't have to get into the .NET code for any of this, and I could tweak this until I bled or something.
Well, we hope you don't bleed, but
it was actually really. I mean, overall, overall the basic structure was built in less than half an hour, and the actual tweaking in terms of swapping out images and picking out what's going to look the best took about 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah, so that was using the traditional Photoshop and Illustrator tools to really tweak down the images exactly what you want as they show up in the interface. Well, that's pretty cool. That's kind of neat. How long did you say the initial animation took you?
Less than 30 minutes. I mean, once I got a quick sample running, it was so easy. I mean, it's only possible because you can do an animation really in 2 tags, just by 2 keyframes.
Very cool. So I want to take a moment here to also demonstrate some of the new things that we've introduced in the last week or so. And we want to show you actually opening, for those of you that deliver traditional web applications, we just got this into the build about a week ago. So everybody keep your fingers crossed that this works. Media Center Sandbox is our team website, and there's a blog up there that we're talking about what things are coming new, as well as we post up sample code up there, and we have this subdomain called play.mediacentersandbox.com that we're going to put up a lot of markup that you can actually browse to and check out yourself. So we wrote a simple hello.mcml application. This is calling out as long as my internet. And here it's saying hello codeless MCL. There's no code. There's an ASP.NET application on the back end that's going to take, hello, let's see, let's call, what's up, Stephen? We'll call Stephen. It's going to call out that, and all of a sudden we've got an animation. We can make this animation do whatever we want. Here it's just kind of a little pulsing, a glowing thing like that. So for those of you that don't want to deliver any local code to the box, hit an ASP.NET application, get back rich animations. So we've got a couple of other ones here that we can demonstrate. We've got the fun.melt, which we kind of used in the Q application. And this takes the Media Center logo and animates it. It should come down. It starts raining down logos. You'll notice that they are randomly generated, the speed at which these logos rain down, and also they will fade out over time. So pretty easy. And for the pièce de résistance, again, remember I'm just hitting a web server and getting an XML file. I'm going to give you alphabet soup, and I really love this sample because it really highlights a lot of the power of the platform in not such a glitzy way. We're going out and getting, now let me kind of walk you through what you're seeing on screen. We've got basically 2 alphabets of uppercase and lowercase letters. These letters are either rotating or they're spinning, and they're animating a move position. And you'll notice, if you'll pick out one letter, you'll notice that it doesn't have the same animation throughout its lifetime. It will move and it will be velocity. So all in XML, we've got some local variables here that we can use in XML, and we can randomly generate the values for this sample so that these things change over time on a random interval. So we're adjusting the velocity of which they spin or they twirl and their position change on the fly. Again, I'm just hitting an XML file that's on a web server. I can hook this up to an ASP.NET and generate this XML on the fly. I could edit this, put in Stephen's name, and great, all of a sudden we got Stephen spinning and twirling and flipping around. So it's a pretty compelling way to build applications and services that really look perfect. Everything that we've shown you today, if I were to run this on the Xbox 360, you would get the same class of animations and everything like that in full fidelity. So we want to wrap things up here. I'll give you 2 resources, kind of keep this really simple for you. You can get today's software development kit through MSDN at the URL that you see up there. This documents the hosted HTML platform that you see in applications written today. If you're an MSDN subscriber or you're on the Windows Vista beta, you also have access to our beta SDK that has Media Center markup language and Media Center presentation layer, as well as the WinFX way to build applications for Media Center. We also have a Media Center platform team blog at mediacentersandbox.com. Lots of posts up there that will talk about what's new and what's coming, and we're constantly going to be putting up their sample code so that if you have the beta, you can run this tool and hit the markup and twirl it, learn it, and use it. So I think we're like 29:54. We ended like perfectly. So we'll open up the floor. If you have any questions, just grab one of the two mics, and we'll be glad to answer any questions. Oh, while you're making your way, if you want to, make sure you fill out your session evaluation. You can win a Creative Zen Micro, and plus, I'd love to hear your feedback on how good a job I do or not. So the next time I'm in front of you, I can do a better job. So please take the time to do that. Go ahead.
Hi, so Microsoft's building this really cool thing called WinFX, and it's going to have this really cool thing called WPF. It's going to have really great tool support and all sorts of cool stuff like that. Why have you guys built another markup language?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. It was perfect. I was hoping somebody would ask that question. Number one, I want you to take a key takeaway that if you want to use that cool WinFX stuff, you can use that cool WinFX stuff in Media Center, in Windows Vista, okay? So you'll be able to leverage that learning and that technology. Second of all, your second part of your question was, why did we create this whole new thing? Well, actually, we started work on the Media Center presentation layer a couple of years before Avalon started, and our application framework has been out there for a while, and we're just now making it available to third parties. The reason we made it available is because it's designed from the ground up for remote-controlled experiences. Only remote-controlled experiences. It's not available on the Windows desktop, for example, okay? So the thing that's different about us is WinFX is designed to be the next generation platform for Windows. So you can do mouse and keyboard and all those wonderful things. At some point in the future, we hope to not have two of these, and you don't have to make that choice of one or the other. When that'll happen, I have no idea. But it's really just a thing of ours was designed, some of the things that schematic and others that wanted in a remote-controlled environment, we had already done that work. So we're just making that available. Again, you can use any of the three platform choices to develop and deliver experiences to the consumer. It's really just a choice of which one you want. As I said at the beginning, if you were going to do a WinFX experience for the Windows desktop, you would probably want to stick with that for your Media Center work because you don't want to go off and create a whole educational mess for your staff and stuff like that. However, if you're not really worried about the Windows desktop and you want to only target remote-controlled experiences for digital media, you might choose Media Center Markup Language because you're going to have some things there that are available to you there that may not be available to you in WinFX that you might have to do additional work with. So it's really a choice of what kind of experience you want to build and choosing the best technology for that. So hopefully that answers your question.
But I also want to point out that you really don't get all the features of Media Center by doing, the Windows presentation foundation applications. I think one of the key things that we really like about Media Center Markup Language for schematic anyways is the video overlay capabilities, and that's sort of really important for the interfaces that we come up with. You just have to sort of make a choice between one or the other.
So to clarify that a little bit more, you can fully do a video overlay in WinFX on top of the desktop. When we're hosted in Media Center, because of the Media Center API, it's a DirectX application. We tend to fight with them, so you won't be able to do some of those video overlays in WinFX inside of Media Center. But if you choose to do a WinFX application on the desktop, party on. You can actually do more and better things with theirs than you can with ours. We have one video viewport because we're designed for the consumer to experience one piece of video at a time, whereas they can do 10, 12, however many you want to. All right?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could clarify a bit what it means when you say the applications, or refer to the applications running on any of the extender devices. Are they actually truly running on those devices, or are we looking at more something like sort of a reverse remote desktop where you're really kind of scraping the screen and onto another device?
Okay. Right. With the Xbox extender, it runs on the Xbox. With other devices, it's sort of like a screen blast effect, but can you elaborate further?
Let me clarify that a little bit. We have basically two remoting types. I've actually got a blog post that if you go up to blog.mediacentersandbox.com, I'll put a link to it that kind of explains all this. But basically we have two different type of remoting scenarios. For all of the application logic, all of that runs on the Media Center PC itself, period. All the application logic runs on the Media Center PC. The difference is the remoting of the user interface. For both hosted HTML and WinFX, Windows Presentation Foundation, those are using a remote desktop-like remoting experience. So you're getting about 3 to 5 frames per second of the user interface. For the Media Center presentation layer applications, in a nutshell, it's more complex than this, but the layman's approach or the layman's term for this is we're sending the XML, the Media Center markup language, over to the Xbox 360, and the Xbox 360 is rendering that user interface. With either two of those remoting paradigms, we're sending the audio and the video out of band from the user experience, the user interface, and those are decoded locally on the Xbox. So even though you might have 3 to 5 frames per second hosted HTML remoting of the user interface, you have full motion 30 frames per second video or a full audio, no skips, no glitches, and all that. So it's kind of a complex. We've actually got one of our lead developers putting together a rather long, voluminous blog post that talks about how this, at a very deep and granular level, I've made it way simpler than it is for the markup. So hopefully that helps you understand the remoting. But all three of the application types will remote to Xbox 360. It's really just the fidelity that's going to be different.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the range of options available for gadget sidebar style functionality on the 10-foot interface going forward, what the strategy is for that.
So I believe gadgets are mostly HTML. Is somebody from the gadget team that can kind of go, yes, I've got that right? Anybody here? Okay, so I'm not the sidebar guy. I kind of only limited know that those are HTML and plus JScript, I believe is the thing. You can create those. You can have tight integration between the gadgets and the Media Center experience. You would have to connect that plumbing. We're not doing any plumbing within our API set or SDK to automatically inherit those things. However, it should be fairly simple to implement that plumbing, but I would really defer that to the sidebar team to have them answer that. Or if you'll contact me when we're done here, I'll get your email address and we'll sync up and make sure that we get that question back to you. I'll blog it on the Media Center Sandbox as well. So gadgets and integration with Media Center. All right.
Hi. We've seen a lot of applications the last few days around the Media Center, and I think everyone's seen futuristic movies where you walk into your living room, you have this 10-foot view. What are the type of applications that you wouldn't recommend? The limitations.
Okay. Gosh, let me just throw a couple out there. Exchange admin plugin. Probably not the best choice for a Media Center application. Although I will caveat that if you're an Exchange admin and you happen to be watching Law and Order and you want to check on something, there might be something that you would create. Really, the things that you want to create for Media Center are consumer experiences. What do you do at home with your PC, or what kind of content do you consume at home? Those are kind of the two main focus areas for Media Center. So you're not going to do Exchange plugins. You're probably not going to do a group policy editor in Media Center, because my wife's never going to use that. So think about what your spouse might use from a digital media content or something that's really useful. So we've got a Hotmail reader for Media Center that allows you to browse your Hotmail Plus account. It only works with Hotmail Plus. So you can browse your content and read. I'm not sure if it has an edit function or not, but at least you can read. So I've been talking with the Windows Calendar folks about doing a way that you can actually call up your Windows Calendar when I wake up in the morning. Instead of cranking up the laptop and checking that, or getting that, I just grab the remote control, what's my schedule look like today? We can do some really rich, interesting UI that, automatically broadens things out and makes me get a clearer view of my picture. So, really that's up to you, is what kind of things do you want to be able to do in your home? Home automation is a big thing. Those guys really love us because we give them the platform by which they can get into other rooms of the house without having to worry about a lot of the technology infrastructure. So home automation is certainly an opportunity. So hopefully that kind of gives you a mix of what you might do. Anything else? Oh, all right.
Great. Hi there. I had a quick question for you. This might be elementary, but I'm going to ask it anyway. As far as the main buttons go in the user interface for Media Center, you're showing the RSS feeds and some of the other stuff you guys have developed, and that was lying in the More Programs area. Mm-hmm. Can we add in programs into the main button set?
So glad you asked that question. That is not elementary. That's a great question. So there's lots of places that you can integrate with Media Center. Number one is the Start menu. You don't actually see it in any of this. Let's see if I can actually kind of show you here. I still got time. Guys, there we go. So as I'm navigating the Media Center UI, you don't see it here because I don't have any applications installed. But for example, to the left of Movie Library, there's basically two places for partners. So if you're a movie application, let's say your Internet Movie Database, imdb.com, and you want to create a portal for Media Center users, you could actually install your application and take up a tile that looks just like the Media Center tiles here that's branded your own, and you can launch your application directly from the Start menu. Basically, every end-user feature, except for tasks and tools, you can do pictures and videos. There's 2 tile spaces for partners there. There's 2 tile spaces for movies. There's 2 tile spaces for TV. 2 tile spaces for music. That's the first entry point that you can do. You can also do other entry points. For example, if I drill down into the music library, again, I don't have any third-party applications installed here. For example, I've got Aaron Goldberg here as an album artist. I can hit my More Info button, and I can actually install an application that would be available from this context-sensitive menu. So play, add to queue, you would see a More button that would allow you to launch your application from there. There's about 14 entry points. I think it's 14 entry points throughout the user interface that allows your application to be discovered and usable. So hopefully that answers your question. There's not just more programs, there's other areas. That's the most logical place to put it for a keynote. Yes?
High def. Can you deliver high def over Cat 5, 100 megabit? And is there a limit on the resolution?
So the question is, can I deliver high def over Cat 5? Abso-freaking-lutely. So you can absolutely do high definition. The Xbox 360 is totally capable of doing 1920 by 1080i, progressive, MPEG-2. In fact, we're doing it today in the Microsoft offices with with the current generation of Media Center plus Media Center Extender on Xbox 360. If you have an ATSC over-the-air card, you can freely consume that high definition content on the extender. Works great, works perfectly. In the future, Joe talked about how we're using the open cable unidirectional receiver that allows me to get native digital cable, which has a lot of great high definition content. That will also be natively a part of the Media Center platform, starting with Windows Vista. So absolutely, high definition is the wave. Both our ecosystem enjoys it, and we use it a lot. It's perfect for that. Yeah.
I have a quick question about your opening of the presentation layer. Have you ever considered releasing the interface code for Media Center itself as a sample application?
Great question. We covered this in the SDK, and I think you'll hear more about this in the session that's coming up for designing for the 10-foot space. Basically, the types of partners that we're targeting, AOL, Yahoo, they don't want to look like Microsoft. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me, but they don't want to. And in fact, when you use our brand, you automatically weaken your brand. So I noticed you've got film loop. Is that what that is? If you adopt the Media Center UI, it really blurs the user's perception of what experience they're using. So the majority of the feedback, I say probably about 2 to 3% of the people that I talk with that are shipping applications on a commercial basis, only 2 to 3% of those folks actually want to use the Media Center UI. The great vast majority want to have their own brand, their own experience. For example, the MTV apps that you saw, they have a demographic that they want to reach that the Media Center brand look and feel may not be exactly appropriate for. So that's kind of the key thing. We talk about that in the SDK. In the rank of things that we've got user requests, there's lots of other things that are much higher in priority for us. So I don't think you'll see anytime soon this Media Center look and feel coming so that you can instantiate it. With that said, all of this is Media Center markup language. So you can achieve this same look and feel if you so desired. You probably couldn't partner with us because there's trademarks and stuff like that associated with some of this UI, but effectively you can do UI on par or even better, quite frankly. That opening for the podcast, a client that Schematic did, I think puts our opening animation to shame, quite honestly. So we're hoping that folks will actually do a lot better. Do you have a follow-up?
Just my question is more aimed at having a real-world example application.
Oh, okay. So in the SDK, we're going to ship the podcast client that we've seen with the Helix. We're going to ship that. We're also working on a couple of other things, and there's going to be a ton. I can actually show you, while this is not pretty yet, we have actually a sampler that allows you to kind of browse through and see how to build these different things. So, for example, we've got this mix sampler that shows you shows you the markup, the XML that's used to create these different animations and rotations. So the SDK will ship with the sampler plus at least the podcast app and probably some more as well. So you should have a pretty good foundation by which you won't have to start from scratch. You can copy and paste pre-existing code, change the background PNGs. In other words, instead of a dinky little peanut, remember what I told you about DevArt? A dinky little peanut, you can put your own logo in there and see how to animate it, and it's just a PNG that you replace. Yeah?
A two-part question. In the past, I've had difficulties playing a DVD that was loaded physically on a Media Center extender. And my question is that a feature that was added to the Media Center extender on Xbox 360? And as the second part of the question, digital rights management, protected media, things of that nature. How are you going to manage that with Media Center Extender so that the user can have one Media Center in their home and many Media Center extenders? Okay.
So let me address the first part of your question about remoting RIT DVDs. That's not a technological hurdle, or even your home DVDs.
I'm not. Yeah, like, as an example, Sony has a Media Center that has a carousel, right? Mm-hmm. And I happen to own one of those. Yep. And I've got 200 DVDs sitting in it. Yep. And I want to watch one of those DVDs in my bedroom.
Yep. So the legal issues are exactly the same, whether or not they're ripped on the hard drive or they're sitting in a carousel. Sending that over the wire, there's legal issues with that. It's called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and stuff like that. So we are doing as much as we possibly can within the frameworks of what we can. Okay, so we're doing those things. Now, some of the future technologies that you see with managed copy HD DVD, that been some announcements around CES timeframe, hopefully that will get better. But for the time being, DVDs in a carousel are ripped. You're not going to be able to watch those over the Xbox 360 remoted. I'm like you. I've got a lot of DVDs of my home movies, actually, that before we started archiving these things to Media Center PC, I created a lot of DVDs. I'd like to be able to watch those in other rooms. What I'm having to do is go back, rip those to WMV format so I can watch those. So we hear that clear message. We're trying to get there, and we're seeing some advancements in the technology. To the second question, to DRM, that's the DRM team. Media Center inherits the Windows DRM story. So anything that's possible from a DRM perspective on Windows, we consume in Media Center. We don't have a Media Center DRM or anything like that. We inherit the Windows rights management features that are available through both the .NET Framework as well as Windows Media DRM.
And so but again, when you go to the extender, though, it's going to inherit that same.
So the extender, in most cases, is treated as an extension of the PC, not another PC. So, for example, if I buy content from MovieLink or Cinema Now, Napster, any of those partners, it will remote fine over to the Xbox 360 and other Media Center extenders and play and not be treated as another device that I've copied it over to. It's simply an extension of that, and that's largely due to the fact that all the code runs on the Media Center PC. We're just remoting the UI and the content. So there are a few cases where if the broadcaster has set the CGS-MA flag, it's getting a little bit more technical, but if they set that as copy never, that you can watch it in real time on the extender, but you can't watch it time shifted. But there's like 0.5% of all content that's done that way. So pretty much all of your recorded TV, live TV, remote's fine. Even if the broadcaster has set the flag as copy once or something like that, it plays back fine. So again, inheriting the fundamental Windows things. Yeah?
Hi, I wondered if you could give a quick overview of new things in the Vista SDK. Specifically, are you going to be able to open up the TV guide, access to that?
So for the Windows Vista SDK, I've shown you kind of the majority of the new platform things. We talked about the new platform features, the Media Center markup language preview tool, the MCML sampler is in there, those things, a lot of new documentation. We're totally revising the documentation to be more task-oriented. In the past, it's been technology-oriented, which means you have to do a lot of hunting and pecking to get to different places. In the new task-based oriented, and I think, Ping, you've seen a lot of this stuff, we're saying downloading content. We have a whole section there that tells you how to architect your app if you need to get content from one place to another. So hopefully you'll see those and enjoy those changes. The second part of your question was related to what?
Programming guide, getting access to that.
So the EPG, that's, again, not a technological hurdle. That's a licensing hurdle. Microsoft licenses the electronic programming guide for end-user use only. If we had to go license it so that every third-party developer could have access to it, we would never be able to ship Media Center. So if you need that electronic programming guide, we have done some fundamental under-the-work plumbing with a couple of APIs like Find Program and Find Service, so that if you go off and license the guide data yourself for your end-user consumption, you can make one-to-one mappings to our electronic programming guide. So, for example, you can say, record Little House on the Prairie, and we will record Little House on the Prairie. Or record or tune to channel King 5, which is a channel in Seattle, and we will tune to King 5 because those metadata mappings line up one-to-one. So we've done some work under the covers so that you can do those types of things, whether or not you license the EPG data or not. But as far as giving you access to our EPG data, we don't have that much money. I'm sorry. It's hard to believe, but you know, it's, they're really protective of that that data. So, pardon me? I can't hear you.
What about pushing our own data?
What about pushing your own data into the EPG? So there's a pretty clear distinction between the Media Center product and the Media Center platform. So our EPG is our EPG, and it has to always work for the consumer. When my wife can't record Law and Order, it's just not a pretty picture in my face. So we really are protective of that Media Center experience. So we're not opening that up to third parties at this time. In some of the other geographies, you can build your own EPG. So in some geographies that Windows Vista will ship in, there is not a well-established EPG provider. We're providing a tool set by which third parties can build those. So hopefully that'll extend it for you. Yeah. We've got about 6 more minutes.
Yeah, very simple thing. My Media Center sits on top of my home theater system, right? It looks like it. It's a nice box. When I first have shown the Media Center to my wife, she was very happy, you know, very nice look and feel and so on and so on. and I installed that, and eventually my wife has seen that the media center was just a PC, right? And comes back the fear of folders and file format and all that. So why did you make the media center a UI and not a media center device as we did with the Xbox?
So one thing, with Windows comes a platform. With Xbox 360, unless you're a game developer title or plug in some way to Xbox Live, you as a third party can't really develop for it unless you're a game title developer. So the bar to entry for Xbox 360 from a development perspective is pretty darn high. Second of all, some of the UI things that we wanted to do, quite frankly, before Xbox 360 came along, we couldn't accomplish some of these things that you see here. So there's those two things. Really, we believe that the PC enables a lot of other scenarios that set-top boxes or devices don't, in a way of growth, and the fact that regardless of files or folders here, in fact, all the music library is pulled from 4 different folders on the machine, and we abstract that away. When you talk about a device model, you're talking about a much more limiting factor, and the people that can come in and play with that device becomes a lot fewer. So really it's the perspective of we wanted to be both a product and a platform, and we believe the PC is really the best device to put in the home that enables some of these extended scenarios. And the whole reason we put out Media Center Extender was because people don't want to put a PC in their living room. So leave the PC in your home office, use the Media Center Extender, which is a great device, to enjoy all the content that's there. So we'd love to hear your feedback on that. We get that request a lot. It's really, we've got to get the product out there, get the people see it. You saw this morning in Joe's keynote that we're extending the user interface, for example, to the Toshiba Gigabeat. So it's the same basic UI paradigm, so you don't have to learn more. So we are getting bits and pieces of that UI into other devices out there, but the flagship product is still going to be on the PC. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Great. I've got another question for you. It's actually 2 questions this time. The first one is the ATI Accor, the cable car tuners that are going to be shipping with Vista. I know the first gen ones are going to be USB based, and then they've had plans to come out with a network attached version as well. For the network attached version, are multiple media centers going to be able to access those tuners? So if you've got 15 tuners sitting on your network and you have 5 media center PCs, can they go and grab resources as they're available on the net? And then my second question has to do with IPTV, and will there be any IPTV integration into Media Center? Okay.
Great questions. I got about 3 minutes. As far as the network attached storage TV tuner, I have absolutely no idea. I know that the first generation device is a USB. I don't know what the plans are to make that a network attached storage device. If you'll see me after here, give me your business card, right on the back, that question. I'll try to loop you in with the right person that handles that particular area.
I've seen some rumors about that, and the word is that it's not going to, you won't be able to share the network device. Just rumors, but that's... So
for the first generation, yeah, it's tied to that particular PC. It'll still remote the content over Media Center Extender. And for the IPTV is an interesting scenario. We are looking at that for future versions of Media Center. Really, we look at that as yet another cable pipe, because that's really effectively what it is. So it's definitely on our roadmap. There's not a real broad acceptance of IPTV yet in the cable MSOs. And until they get on board with that largely, it's not a big enough market for us to just go off and do it onto its own, right? So the open cable unidirectional receiver is something that they are buying into. They've obviously got cable card TVs ready that you put in your cable card and you go. So it presents a market opportunity. But until those MSOs buy into that technology, we have to kind of wait and let them go with it. And I've got 1 minute and 23 seconds.
Okay, I'll throw you a fairly easy one. At the top level of the navigation where we have the music apps, etc., and you said we can create our own apps, can we access all of the music content in our music app so that we don't have to go and fetch album art and artist data? Is that all exposed to us so we can write our own music app that combines the existing assets on the machine and whatever else we want to do?
So great question. Let me attempt to answer it in a minute. The short answer is yes. Because it is Windows, all of those files and folders are available to you. In fact, the music library experience that you see here is built on top of Windows Media Player. We're calling out to the MIX06 and getting this data and album art from them. You can do that exact same thing, although you can also create the application that goes out and enumerates those folders by yourself. So all of this, we're not doing anything any different than you as a third-party application developer would do. We don't have any special secret sauce here.
Right, but is that all that meta content there? Is that stored locally on the machine, or do I have to go source it out?
Yes, it's stored on the local machine. We are calling into the WIMP player to get that metadata ourselves through their Windows Media Format SDK. So you could do the exact same thing to get that metadata yourself.
And is that kind of code available, or is that something you
Absolutely.
can expose?
If you get the Windows Media Player SDK and the Windows Media Format SDK, you can use either one. You can use WIMP to get that metadata, or you can just write a Format SDK application yourself to get that. So the Windows Media Format SDK has an application called metadataedit.exe, and it's got full source code that shows you how to open up that WMA, get the metadata out of it, and display it in your app and everything.
And the same, final question, the same applies to the photos and other content, or is that a different scenario?
Photos, we are using some of the Windows Media Player library. I'm not familiar with if they're exposing those APIs that you can get to those. However, again, those photos are on the hard drive. Whatever metadata is associated with them, with like EXIF data, you can write an application that gets that information. So, I'm really hoping that people will create more and interesting new applications that plug in and extend our photos capabilities. I'm a photo hobbyist myself, and there's a lot of data there that when I'm scrolling through, I'd like to be able to say what was my shutter speed and what was my lighting conditions. I'd like to know the white balance. We could write a media center application that would get that data from the JPEG itself and display the EXIF data so I can learn, for example. It's just one example. So again, it's Windows fundamentally. Whatever you can do in Windows, you can bubble up to Windows Media Center. And that's it. Thanks for coming. Enjoyed it. If you got any questions, you can.
I have one quick announcement. Schematic is hiring, and if you guys are interested and you want to work with great apps like the Q app or MTV, you should talk to us or talk to me or any of the folks at Schematic, and we'll be at the Mixer tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you.